some staff feel that it's not being sufficiently pro-Israeli, and some staff have concerns that it is it's not being sufficiently pro-Palestinian.
It was, in your view, a curious decision on the part of Tim Davies to appear before those Conservative MPs behind closed doors last night.
I wouldn't like to say, John. I think it's unusual for a Director General to go in front of the 22 committee. But the BBC, as ever, as frequently happens, can never win. It always finds itself caught in the middle. Now, that's something that it suffers from both externally with audiences, and it struggles to make both sides of arguments happy. It's equally true within the BBC. Obviously, BBC is a huge organisation, as you know, John, many thousands, 20,000 odd employees. And unsurprisingly, they don't all think the same thing. So what happens is when we find ourselves in very polarising times that elicit strong passions and opinions, the BBC's reporting comes under the spotlight from its own staff, much in the same way as it comes under scrutiny externally.
Yes. Well, I've made the point myself before, the BBC is not so much a giant organisation as a giant federation of tiny organisations, and differences of opinion, some of them expressed privately, some less privately, they're inevitable, especially on an issue like this.
Yeah, and look, what you've got is the BBC's journalists trying to navigate a very sensitive, challenging conflict, whilst trying to ensure that it is fair and accurate to both sides. Now, unfortunately, what's happening is that some staff feel that it's not being sufficiently pro-Israeli, and some staff have concerns that it is it's not being sufficiently pro-Palestinian. And those people feel very strongly, as do many people in the world, understandably, and their concerns start to leak out.
It was, in your view, a curious decision on the part of Tim Davies to appear before those Conservative MPs behind closed doors last night.
I wouldn't like to say, John. I think it's unusual for a Director General to go in front of the 22 committee. I mean, I'm not sure that he necessarily chose to do it. I think he was invited. Just to be clear,
Indeed.
That invitation was extended many months. Well, I don't know actually many months, but it was certainly extended before the conflict erupted, before there was any knowledge that this was going to be a thing. Tim Davies' job as the Director General of the BBC is to go out and make the case for the BBC, as it attempts to, underline what its purpose is, the role that it plays, fundamentally secure funding and a good funding deal at the next licence fee negotiations. So, in terms of the Director General getting on the front foot and looking to engage with MPs, I consider to be an entirely reasonable and sensible course of action. Now, the timing was unfortunate, but at the same time, one could argue that no matter when this argument, no matter when he'd got called in, there was always going to be something that the Conservatives were going to use as an opportunity to give him a bit of a hiding on. Yeah, you could argue he was on a hiding to nothing. Equally, you could say, well, look, this is the boss of the Beeb needs to be out there, fighting its corner.